المدخل العام هاوي مدخل عام، مش كلمة، مدخل عام. يسعدنا أن نلتقي في ثالث جلسة من الجلسات العلمية المدرجة ضمن برنامج مؤتمر الإعلام العربي في دورته الثانية حول موضوع الهيمنة الرقمية العالمية وسبل مجابهتها عربياً. فبعد أن تعرفنا هذا الصباح على مجموعة من المواضيع، منها التحديات المطروحة في عديد المجالات ليس المقام في التذكير بها، وعلى جهود عربية في المستوى العربي بغية التصدي للسطوة الرقمية العالمية، تتيح لنا هذه الجلسة الممتعة مسبقا أن ننفتح على ما يجري في مستوى خارج المنطقة العربية، وذلك من خلال الاطلاع على تجارب عالمية متنوعة. ويدير الحوار شخصية إعلامية واتصالية دولية مرموقة، وهو الدكتور جواد متقي، الأمين العام لاتحاد إذاعات آسيا والمحيط الهادي، فإليه الكلمة وأمسية ممتعة للجميع.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. It would be very difficult to run the conference after lunch. And I hope that you are in a good shape and will not go to sleep during the conversation. For the debate part, probably I will walk and talk to you and try to talk to the people who are sleeping. So be careful. If you go to sleep, I will put questions to you. We had practically 3 interesting sessions this morning. The ASBU president, Abu Fahad, said a few important points. He said that media, the geographical map has been changed and replaced by media map. It is media who decides and suggests and create the public awareness on that. So media map instead of geographical map. He also said that military hegemony has been replaced by media hegemony. Important points. Added that citizens have become consumers instead of producers. He also said that we can't do anything by our own itself. Then the next session talked about challenges and mainly protection of personal data was focused in that session, you remember. And whether this personal data could be really or practically protected, it was a question raised by Riyadh Naj, and it still is a valid question, whether it is possible to protect personal data locally, whereas it is on internet. The important point of cyber ethics, cyber philosophy, values also was referred in that session. Then Abdurrahim Suleiman talked about the fact that we, the Arab countries, cannot respond to this hegemony as individual partners, individual players. And they should get together in a collective approach. He also mentioned that the advantage of Arab world is that they all speak in the same language. I agree with him. I may also add that you have less diversity compared to our Asia Pacific, hugely diverse region. And then this also brings to the point that we are broadcasters. And we have a mandate as public service media or even commercial media to serve the public in such a competitive situation, competitive environment, and with the competition that we have. So that's why the session brings you perspective from different parts of the world. We have 3 distinguished speakers, Giacomo Mazzon from Italy, and George Award from UNESCO, and Professor Andrea Estasi, and I'm requesting Fetten to make sure that he will join us online as soon as possible. So let us start conversation by inviting Giacomo to present the European perspective, and feel free to ask difficult questions to him. Difficult questions to him, easy to me.
Okay. So the presentation, just to create a divisive environment, is you have this. I need this.
Okay.
As you see, I choose as title this title that for me described the situation quite perfectly, in the sense that we started from a sort of far west internet, and now we are moving into territories of regulation that were inconceivable some years ago. So let's go from where all this started. Probably some of the digital natives, they are not even aware that all the internet as it is today started around the end of the end of last century. In 98, there was the promulgation of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act in the US. It was made by Al Gore, that you remember. At that time, he was the deputy of Clinton. He was supposed to be the next president of the United States, but then he failed. Digital Millennium Copyright Act introduced a substantial distinction between the platform that at that time they were just starting and the existing media. The principle for those like me that works in media for 40 years, and even more here in this room, is that if you do something wrong against the law in the media, then you are fully responsible. Is responsible the guy that write the wrong information, responsible the publisher, is responsible the director. With the Copyright Act, Millennium Copyright Act, was written for the first time that if you are a platform and you carry something that somebody else posted, you are not responsible. The only thing that you have to do is, if somebody let you know that there was something wrong, you have to act. There is no need of fixing a time, there is no obligation, you have to do. And if you do, you are not accountable for what has been published. For me, being duty editor in a newspaper first, and then at the radio, then in national broadcasting, that's absolutely absurd, because if I do something wrong, if I say a wrong news, if I defamate somebody, I am fully accountable for that. While if it happens on Google, on Facebook, etc., thanks to this, nobody is accountable. You say this is a law of the US. No, it's not a law of the US. It's the applicable law for all the platforms that are based in the US, independently, irrespectively where they operate. Because when you access to Google, you access to Facebook, you sign a contract at the beginning of your relation with this platform in which you say, do you accept that you are under the law of the country where the platform is regulated. So this is all where it started. The second point, the second big agreement that allowed to implement this situation was the fourth protocol of the WTO agreement, the World Trade Organization. That is the creation of the basis of the globalization of the trade market. This protocol says that if you create a telecom service and this service goes over the telecom network, all the countries that undersign the WTO agreement accept not to have a supplementary taxation for the new services that are carried on telecom networks. This is the second pillar on which the platform today operates. If they provide a new service, and all that Facebook does, Netflix does, etc., is considered new services, and as such cannot, under the WTO agreement, if your country has signed this agreement, and 99% of the countries in the world have done, you cannot ask them, you cannot put obstacle to their activity, okay? Then when we will come to taxation, keep in mind this, because this is an important point. Europe was one of the first region of the world to implement this new steps in creating a globalized internet world. And so in 2000, just 2 years after the Millennium Copyright Act of the US, in the EU, they made a directive on e-commerce, regulating the e-commerce, that at that time was inexistent. Remember, Amazon at the time was still selling books. And to complement this, there was an agreement that was signed with the US that was called Safe Harbor Privacy Principle. That means that the country that participate to the Safe Harbor Privacy Principle, they don't question the activity of the companies that are regulated within the other area. So Europe and US signed this. It means that the European accept that the regulation of the privacy that is made in the US is satisfactory to the principle for which companies are accountable in Europe, and vice versa. The only problem is that Europe has no internet platform, and the US they have. So it means that with that, the European authorities gave permission to American operators to act according to their principle and to their regulation on privacy. And you have heard this morning from the Tunisian privacy authority that there is practically no regulation, or at least no cogent regulation for privacy in the US. So there was freedom of action in the European zone for these companies. And this system worked quite well, or at least was unchallenged for some years. And some breaches in the system start, and they started in Europe again, because Europe realized that the rules of the game that they've accepted with the US were absolutely asymmetric. They were favoring US-based companies against the European companies. What happened? For instance, if you do what Facebook does in Europe with the data of the European citizen, if he's a European company, they will go to jail. But because it's Facebook that is based in the US, they make profit out of it. So based on this, there was Mr. Schremp that was mentioned this morning that went to the European court and said that there was discrimination for European citizens based on that. And he won the case, and the court says that the safe harbor was not good and has to be changed. In 2016, the European Union created another agreement with the US called Privacy Shield that basically didn't change the core question, which legislation applies. And the Court of Justice, again, condemned the European Union, saying that this was unacceptable according to the European human rights principle. Then the European Union start another approach to the problem. They try to say, okay, we have a problem in legislation, so let's try to engage the platform on a self-commitment basis. And they start with child protection. For instance, there was an agreement already in 2012 about a safer internet for children, basically to try to ban child pornography. In 2015, there was another agreement with the platform about terroristic contents that has worked quite well. Then there was another in 2016 about hate speech online, and then in 2018, a code of practice against disinformation. All these codes are voluntary commitment. So the platform, they signed protocols with the European Union in which they said, okay, we will commit to block terrorist content, we are committed to stop child pornography, etc., but we will do on our own basis. And the European Union said, okay, you sign a code of conduct and you commit to a certain number of results in this action. But the experience of these years, 10 years of self-regulation, the experience was deceiving. And in 2022, the European Commission came back to the platform and said, okay, we have seen that you have done a certain number of things, but most of the commitment that you took were not satisfied. So self-regulation didn't work. Now we go to hard regulation. And after they revised the code of practice, they make more cogent the regulation, they fix better the parameters that had to be respected, but they moved to harder regulation. In 2018, and this was mentioned also this morning, the first tough regulation was made on privacy data, and the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, entered in force. Since then, means that the platform are obliged to respect a certain number of criteria when they collect, store, use, and trade the data about private data of person. In the meantime, was not only European Union move, but the European Council of Europe Convention 108 that was mentioned this morning again by the Privacy Authority of Tunisia. They transformed the Convention 108 on data protection, so not only personal data, but all the data in general. And this convention has been revised to make it digital. The next step that has just entered in force, 16 November 2022, so we are talking of less than 2 months ago, all the commitment that the platform take as self-commitment and then co-regulation commitment through the code of practice now have a practical law where if the commitments are not satisfied and not respected, then the European Union can pursue this behavior, this wrong behavior, could make fines, could even stop the activity of the platform in the country or in all European countries. This was welcome as a landmark new set of European rules for a safer and more accountable online environment. Last slide. All this regulation doesn't work if there is no enforcement. And the enforcement is there. Based on the 2018 regulation on privacy, GDPR, there are two actions and two recent decisions. One is a few days ago. Facebook group, Meta, has been fined for more than 600 million euros fines for non-respect and for breach of the code of privacy commitment. This trend is not only a European trend, because, for instance, 1 year ago entered in force in Australia the news media bargaining regulation that obliged internet platform to pay an amount to the media, traditional media, written, radio, and TV, for the use of their contents. And the same legislation is now going to be adopted in Canada, as Professor Javad will tell us in the next month with better direct experience. Thank you for your attention.
Okay. Thank you very much, Giacomo. I can take one quick question from the floor to Giacomo if there is. And if there is not, so I would like to ask, in one of your slides, you made a reference to regulation. Is Europe alone in this effort of combining Thank you very much. That the other speaker, Andrew, also online. So is Europe alone in this effort of combining self-regulation, co-regulation, hard regulation, etc., and implementation of that? Is this, would you think?
Thank you for the question. Yes, this European Union is very well aware that even if Europe is the second biggest market in the world for the US platforms, and also for TikTok, for the global internet platform is the second world market in terms of richness, in terms of population, this risk not to be enough, because there are various ways to bypass Europe and to try to not to respect the regulation. That the same set of principles will apply in the rest of the world. So European Union is helping all countries or areas of the world that want to promote similar regulation. And for instance, the GDPR regulation has inspired a similar law in India, has inspired a similar law in other parts of the world. And the more countries will adopt that, the more the whole system will enter in force. The second important aspect that probably you are aware of is that even the UN has taken over in this. And as you probably know, Gutierrez, in his agenda for the UN, that is the basis of the second mandate of 4 years that start now, he has made 3 main points for where he thinks that there is a need for common activity in all the countries of the world. One is on pandemic issues, the second is on climate change, but the third is on digitalization. So the second this movement.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing the European perspective. Let me take you through the Asian perspective, if I may use this also, and if I may request colleagues to put presentation on a screen. If it's change the order. Okay. The left one, yes.
This one?
Yes, that is the one. Thank you very much. Yes. Challenge, technology challenge. Well, in this part, I'll take you through Asian perspective and see how the Asian are ready to deal with digital platforms. But before that, let me share some statistics about some of the financial aspects of this, some of the platforms, as well as number of the audiences and clients. I take you just give you an example that the Google, if I may say, the upper part of the slide also, the number of Google users worldwide is nearly 4 billion. And currently the revenue is $282.11 billion. This is statistics for Apple's, is that the net income in 2022 was almost 10 billion. Apple's global revenue rose to $365 billion in 2022. The number of subscribers for Netflix was, if I may see the figure, if you can bring a little bit down, colleagues cannot see the statistics up. Anyway, the revenue for 12 months ending end of September was $31 billion. This figure for TikTok in terms of advertisement revenue was $11.6 billion, which is more than the combination of total Twitter and Snapchat. And TikTok had 1.2 billion monthly users in 2021, which is expected to reach 1.8 in 22. When we look at the revenue for Amazon, it comes to $500 billion with an increase of almost 10% per year. And these examples that I showed actually clearly shows that these companies financially are more powerful than many countries in the world, at least we can say that. As if some new countries have been established, have been introduced. Seems that Asians have more challenge in technology. Okay, let me take you to Asia and look at the statistics in our region. The number of internet users in Asia is 2.5 billion. And there are 1.3 billion mobile internet subscribers in our region. By 2025, digital video will reach 82% of internet users. And that means 2.2 billion viewers, 2.2 billion audience in Asia will watch content on the internet through digital platforms. And that is concern of public broadcasters and commercial broadcasters, traditional broadcasters, that they may lose these audience, 2.2 billion audiences, to digital platforms. So what to do? What they can do to stay relevant, to serve the public, and how ABU respond to this challenge. The first point that I have to mention here in our region is the fact of diversity. Diversity in all aspects of the region, and diversity in digital also. We call it digital gap, digital divide. We do have the most advanced organization in the world within our membership, like NHK operating 8K. We have also organizations who are far behind. Even some of them have not been able to introduce digital. So with this fact, we have to look at Asia, but we see all members from the developing countries to the most developed countries or organizations, they are in the same way, but with different approach. What ABU does is to bring them on board and bringing them into conversation, sharing the information as you do here. The second point is to advocate digital transformation, and this is what we're doing through training with conferences, seminars, advisory services, and we do constantly for all members, and we run several researchers studies, which two of them I brought it here. Digital transformation strategy is always ready for 36% of them, and currently have a formal digital transformation strategy in place for 60% of the broadcasters. And number three is embracing digital innovation. Innovation is something that we always mention, we always use, because ABU members want innovation in content production, in delivery, in reaching the audience. And again, that has to be emphasized and focused in whatever we do, in sharing the content, in brainstorming sessions and all that, as well as bringing to their attention, helping them to look into OTT, to advertising based on video on demand, to subscription-based video on demand, AI, VR, AR, and all possible digital platforms. So what is the way forward that we believe in Asia? I think 3 points. One is ABU members are looking into the fact that they have to own their own video on demand platforms. I'll give you examples. So they introduced, most of them, their own in-house video demands. Number two, they believe, and as a way forward, to produce quality content based on local culture, the community, the language for the audience. And three, of course, partnership. Let me give you a few examples in-house arrangements. For instance, NHK Japan, they introduced NHK Plus, and they own this video streaming service, enables viewers to watch NHK terrestrial broadcast program on the internet so they can practically reach everybody, everywhere in Japan. ABC Australia did the same by introducing iView, video on demand and catch-up TV service, which provides access to all TV programs that are broadcast through the ABC channels and they can put live and live stream on iView to reach all audiences. We see the same in Thai public service media, VIPA. They introduced this in-house video on demand platform to offer quality video on demand to Thai about 100 million people. Singapore introduced Me Watch as an in-house entertainment hub offering free access to on-demand digital content. The same did Indonesia, RRI, official digital applications. They call it RRI Play Go. So these were examples on how some of the members in Asia introduced their own platform. Some of them also offering quality content with local culture, but globally to the audience that they want to see. TRT Turkey is one of them. They have a contract relationship with Netflix and Apple TV just to get their content to reach the public around the globe. This is a commercial broadcaster in Tokyo, TBS, and they entered in a strategy partnership with Netflix, with TV7, a production company owned by TBS Tokyo, to produce multiple original live action and put it to many countries in the world. And C is members fostering partnership within their organizations, within the country, with a third party platforms. I brought an example from Korea, where KBS, MBC, and SBS got together and established this OXO, they call it, and the largest video streaming service in South Korea, which they offer the program to almost 4 million subscribers. So this was some ideas that I shared with you to tell you that the Asian broadcasters selected 3 points as their way forward. One is to have their own platform, and two is to introduce, to partner with international platforms in order to reach the public. And of course, 3 is to focus on quality, local production, quality production. But there's a huge gap, and there is far from where we have to go in future. So I stop here, and I'm sorry for technical problems. And now I would like to invite George to tell us his story and what UNESCO offers.
Thank you. From my end, I will maybe as well go back to the conference title, where I did maybe slightly change the visionary approach to a global digital governance. And that's what we are trying, or will be seeing together in the next few minutes, and the work of UNESCO in this approach. Of course, I will not be talking much about UNESCO as such. However, UNESCO is known, or one of its strength and the convening power of it is being that platform that's bringing together the different actors, from civil society to public sector, academia, of course, member state, as well as tech companies. The approach I'm going to be going through that is, of course, when we talk about the digital ecosystem, definitely with that we have a lot of opportunities that comes along with that. But again, we are facing a lot of challenges, especially when we talk about freedom of expression online. Hence, guided by the Windhoek Plus 30 Declaration on press freedom, our approach for information as a public good goes and looks at different processes in a holistic approach. What we do, we advocate for greater transparency and accountability of digital platform, including, of course, countering mis and disinformation as well as hate speech. We empower people with media and information literacy skills, support media viability, and work to build societal resilience to harmful content online, which as well we've been seeing and talking more about that, and it's increasing to be able to and through different partnership that we do and collaboration at the global level. We do support trustworthy and independent media and work with journalists to address the information needs, especially in times of emergencies. We also trained judges to be able, again, to close that loop on international standard that will be tackling different challenges, in particular when we talk about human rights approaches, and advocate for digital ecosystem based on that, with access, open accessibility, as well as multi-stakeholderism. When we talking about greater transparency and accountability of digital platforms, and here what we have, of course, a lot of work been done in this regard. One of the latest briefs that were produced, it's named Letting the Sunshine In, that's talking about the transparency and accountability in the digital age. In this area, and the aim is to enhance, of course, transparency, in particular in the internet and internet platform companies in particular. This brief comes at a moment of heated debate on the power of internet companies in economic, social, political life, and their role in shaping the communication landscape. The initiative to enhance the transparency on the internet company, of course, this comes within UNESCO's ongoing multi-stakeholder work to promote, protect human rights in the digital ecosystem, and develop recommendation, which as well was seen on ethics of artificial intelligence, which is in a very challenging area, but at the same time a much needed one. Countering disinformation and hate speech is, again, the main or part of the core of the work, especially that will tackle from different aspects with all what's happening and we're seeing on social media, on the internet. This is, of course, it's governed within the framework of the United Nations framework and strategy and action plan on hate speech. In this regard, UNESCO emphasized the importance of human rights-based approach to tackle hate speech, of course, including through safeguarding freedom of expression. The support to country, and in this regard, supporting countries to support regulatories and judicial operation, as well as developing educational responses and policy and legislation that promote, protect, uphold international human rights. Hence, the work as well address online hate speech, which is, again, we've been seeing the increase of that, in taking the acts of equipping learners with digital citizenship skills, so that people at all age learn to navigate the internet safely and in a more responsible manner. some facts here or info regarding to disinformation and hate speech and what's been done in this regard. In a few months, 3 months within 2021, over 85,000 videos that were violated YouTube hate speech policies were removed. Content within over 1,600,000 pieces of content on again with those violations were removed through the hate speech policy on Twitter. Again, within all these numbers in very few months, July, December, for example, with Twitter 2020, we have a lot of organization, over 700 has joined the Media Information Literacy Alliances to really help and building resilience to hate speech. And of course, we have over 80 civil society organizations were trained, and that's part of the whole overall cycle on countering the spread of the harmful content on social media and promote peace as such. Media information literacy is one of the main pillars at UNESCO, where supporting the development of media information literacy for all, to enable people to have the ability to think critically and click wisely, as we say. It targets policymakers, educators, information and media professionals, youth organizations, disabled populations as well. Media information literacy sets competencies and that really allow people to maximize the advantages and minimize harm in the new information and digital communication landscape. These capacities in those areas are indispensable for all citizen, regardless, of course, as we always say, the age and the background. Media viability, and maybe this could be one of the maybe toughest area nowadays with what we're seeing at the global level, because trusted news sources saw a surge in demand during the COVID crisis. But independent journalism continues to face significant challenges, especially when we talk about financial independency and sustainability. And we can talk about many examples, whether globally or in the region. New media is already shaking economics foundation, amplifying advertising income drops, job losses, and news closures are few of the things that's really accompanying those crises. In this regard, UNESCO is working with the European Union on different initiatives that tackle and try to work with countries on data collection, examining financial impact of COVID-19, as well as doing consultation at the national level to see that what kind of possible solutions to overcome these challenges. Building resilience to harmful content online is as well. This is maybe one of the core things relating when we talk about with the topic of our conference today. With the increase of the digitalization of society worldwide has really led to an unprecedented opportunity for the free flow of information that we always talk about. However, a lot of concerns are growing how these digital communication tools have become some instrumental platforms to spreading harmful content and significantly impact on the conflict dynamics and peace as well. So apart from spreading the hate, social media increasingly used to spread disinformation, misinformation, and propaganda against, and it's being designed to mislead the population as such. Yet with all this complexity addressing online potential harm, content lies in the impossibility to define precise boundaries, and that's the challenge of the type of content covering, irrespective of the context. This is why it's important to, in addition, of course, to using human rights principles as a universal baseline, take into account social, cultural, and linguistic nuances to develop and review content moderation and curation rules and tools in a localized manner. Trustworthy and independent media, here in this context of the rapid digital transformation and the thriving of information chaos, characterized by the decline in the commitment of professional journalism, the thrive of disinformation, and a clear decline in the civil society trust in media comes along. Here, how it's being tackled, or one way of tackling that is increasing the critical thinking among youth, and thanks, of course, to piloting the media information literacy skills in formal and non-formal education, improving capacity of media outlets to counter misinformation and disinformation, strengthening media accountability, and increasing media good governance towards users by supporting self-regulation mechanism, sustainability. When we talk about these matters, the overall or the governing aspect of this digital ecosystem is what we call the ROM-X principle, which is the principles that's based on human rights, openness with data, knowledge, and as well as opportunity, for the inclusive access, multi-stakeholderism that we always preach about and talk about, involving and having all the participatory approach. And in all this, that's across, we talk about cross-cutting issues, like when we talk about artificial intelligence and gender equality, or other application in this regard. Talking about maybe the overall ecosystem, and we've heard a lot about the regulation. Again, this is something that, despite the fact that we talk about the freedom of expression, freedom online, however, we've heard a lot about the regulation and regulating, and for that, UNESCO with its partners, we're hosting a global conference that talks about Internet for Trust, which is regulating digital platform for information as a public good. The idea or the aim for that is to come up with some kind of or a guideline that will help regulators, governments, legislators, and companies around the world when they are developing, enforcing, or implementing regulation to manage content online. It will also serve as a tool for civil society for holding governments and companies accountable to their commitment, and for the advocating for a regular system that safeguard freedom of expression. This is, of course, like I started with the Windhoek Plus 30 declaration, I will also end with that, because all that, again, it is taking forward it's part of the steps taking forward Windhoek Plus 30 declaration on information as a public good. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Yeah. Thank you, George. I can take one question to George quickly. Okay, then let it be after this conversation. Okay, since there's no question from the floor to George, but you talked about content in several slides that you showed. Talked about hate speech, talked about harmful and and regulation also you touched, but what do you think and what practically UNESCO can do or has done in regulating content on internet? Very briefly.
Yes, thank you. Well, it's been as I mentioned in the education aspect within formal and non-formal. I think here again UNESCO is started and is doing on two aspects: the aspect of the formal and what we're having next month in terms of the interest for Trust conference that will be working on guidelines that's somehow without putting all this maybe obstacles or restriction, but rather than regulating the content in a sense that
So we can come up with guidelines. We can
yes.
studies, researchers that help broadcasters and regulators to look into that point. This is what practically you will...
Yeah, in that sense. Of course, in the non-formal, a lot of work has been done with youth, going on with youth in terms of on the content, whether on the production or in terms of course, absorbing the messages themselves.
I know that there are other questions, but I would like to, with your permission, to give the floor to last speaker, Andrew Stasi, who will speak for less than 10 minutes. Then we open the floor for questions to all colleagues. Andrew, you have the floor. Andrea, you have the floor.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thank you, our chairman, and thank you to the organizer for inviting me. It's a great pleasure. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be with you in person because of previous commitments, but I'm very happy to be able to join you, at least virtually. Very quickly, I thought about the title and the issues of this Congress that's quite inspirational, and in particular, I focus my attention on digital supremacy in the sense that I think can be positive and should be read as positive, and what are possible key drivers for digital, for fostering the digital development and digital supremacy in our societies and economy as a tool for growth, both of the society and the economy itself. In these few minutes, I'll share some thoughts about these key questions. Then, first, is digital supremacy about data? That are, quite often mentioned in the public debate. I don't think so. What is data really? It is not one thing, but data are innumerable different collection of information, each of them specific to a particular application that aren't interchangeable. The mere collection of huge volumes on data doesn't result per se in a better understanding of the world. In reality, firms also need to acquire infrastructures, technologies, specific analytical techniques and skills, in particular, to infer information from data. And so differently from an oil well, big data doesn't consist of a huge amount of the same product because digital data are different from each other. And some characteristics of big data that are assumed to be critical for the production of some services may be useless regarding the development and provision of other services. Think, for example, of real-time data. They are precious, for sure, for nowcasting services, but they are almost useless, for example, for insurance companies that need historic data instead. The information that the firm infers from its big data often does not coincide with the information that another firm extracts from the very same big data. While the opposite, the same piece of information can be inferred from different data. In both cases, the final outcome does depend on the different combination of data and the analytical technologies and skills used to extract information and value from them. This is why, although there is a market for oil, talking about big data markets wouldn't be consistent with the function of the digital economy. Rather, there are markets where firms produce, and in some cases, not Google's, trade digital data. And firms may compete in these many markets to collect great amounts of such a multiplicity of different digital data. Having said that, however, I have to remark that the free flow of data across international borders is key for the full and effective functioning of digital services, such as, for example, cloud-based services and financial or insurance services. The few countries that have imposed data localization restrictions, such as China or Russia, offer proof that economic and privacy outcomes are not benefited by the location of data. It's very important in this perspective, the current work of the EU Commission and the US government, just to mention an example that close to the region where I work, that is Europe. So EU Commission and US government are working to end the legal uncertainties surrounding transatlantic data transfers through the new transatlantic data privacy framework, which will be key to providing shared safeguards, not only at the transatlantic, but at the global level. The new transatlantic data agreement is in fact critical for the continuation of the development of digital economy and the growth of digital businesses that is today of the entire economy. If digital supremacy is not about data, what is it about? Is it about rules? I don't think so either, even if rules are definitely very important, and I really appreciated, for example, the framework provided by the UNESCO representative, because it's obviously key, super important that the institutions, with the collaboration of experts and private companies, provide a clear framework of principles and rules. To use a metaphor, every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up, according to the famous proverb, and the gazelle knows that it must run faster than the fastest lion, or it will be killed. Okay. Every morning in Europe, a regulator, an academic, a lawyer, an entrepreneur, a startupper wake up, and we know that we will have to analyze, apply, or comply with new rules on digital economy. It's a tough job, and we must do so without forgetting the other rules just issued over the previous and recent years, and trying to implement and follow them in a way that is compatible and not interplaying with each other. In this regard, the recent examples of interplays between Audiovisual Media Services Directive, European Copyright Directive, the regulations on platform to business, Digital Service Act, Digital Markets Act, and lastly, but certainly not finally, the European Media Freedom Act seems to me an approach that is difficult to make operationally effective, and therefore probably would be very difficult to replicate elsewhere too. Finally, so what can be digital supremacy about? I do believe that digital supremacy, that technology for good and for growth and for the future of our societies and economies is not about data, is not about rules. It is definitely, as you mentioned earlier, our chairman, about innovation. In 2019, Nature published its 150th anniversary issue with the news that Google's team of researchers have achieved a big breakthrough in quantum computing, known as quantum supremacy. Supremacy in this positive sense is a term that's very important, and in this case is a term of art. That means we have used the quantum computer to solve in just 200 seconds a problem that would take a classical computer thousands of years. For those of us working in science and technology, is the hello world moment we have been waiting for, the most meaningful milestone to date in the quest to make quantum computing a reality. But we have a long way to go between today's lab experiments and tomorrow's practical applications. And it will be many years before we can implement a broader set of real-world applications.
Thank you.
It's been a 13-year journey for Google to get here. We made early bets, and because we believed and still do that quantum computing can accelerate solutions for some world's most pressing problems, from climate change to disease. And given that nature behaves quantum mechanically, quantum computing gives the possibility and the best possible chance of understanding and simulating the natural world at the molecular level. With this breakthrough, and I'm going to finish, with this breakthrough, we are one step closer to apply quantum computing to solve key issues for our society and economy.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me just finish with one point. As with any advanced technology, quantum computing raises its own anxieties and questions.
Okay.
And in thinking issues with following a set of AI principles that we developed to help guide responsible innovation of advanced technology. So the run toward technology should be along with a careful attention to the basic principles guiding that.
Thank you very much, Andrea. And stay online and we will get back to you. We have about half an hour to interact with colleagues and get your questions. So because the session is after lunch, I had to walk and make sure that everybody will participate. So I open the floor first to anyone. I think you were the first one, but please be very, very brief. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'll try to ask you in English.
Whatever, okay.
Because the question is for you, Dr. Javad. The battle of platforms is reshaping the world. And you talked about original continent and cultural focus with this news. Is it a sort of looking for identity or exporting culture all over the world?
Well, I talk about culture, local culture production. I talk about reaching the local audience. And when you want to reach local audience, you have to talk in their language. You have to touch their own interests, the content that are in the interest of the local society. And you have to address issues related to actually the society. And it's mainly for local attraction of local audience instead of exporting the ideas. But anyway, internet allows everybody to talk to the globe. I request you to stay with one question only, and there are other colleagues who may wish to talk, and then I'll get back to you. I want to go to Africa, and Gregora is here with us, and he is the Director General of African Union of Broadcasters. Let us hear from him from African perspective.
Thank you.
Briefly, but you have, of course, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I don't know if in 2 minutes I will say exactly
20
all
minutes.
what I have in my mind, but let us try to say something. First of all, I heard all what you said, but I would like to say that in Africa, the situation is quite different. Because at times we have the impression that Africa is a sort of no man's land where everybody can do what he wants. The lack of regulation, I want to say, for instance, perhaps I will use the word the weak of the regulations in Africa brings things very, very difficult. You know, in Africa, people are exposed to manipulations, to fake news. Everybody can come and say exactly what he wants with his objective. And people can, when there is regulations, for instance, because we have to make a difference between Africa, sub-Saharan countries and the rest. In sub-Saharan countries, even when there is a sort of regulation, people can bypass this regulation easily and nobody will say, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And digitalization came and met that there was crisis, economic crisis, for instance, concerning the productions, you will find that even television we were producing today are very, they have a lot of problems. And they are broadcasting all things which are coming out of the continent.
Okay.
And this has an impact in the cultural life of people of our area.
Okay.
And as you said it, if many of these big companies are powerful, more powerful than some countries of developed countries, you can imagine what is the situation in Africa. And the other aspect of this is the introduction or the emphasizing of corruption.
Yes.
It is very, very, it's a situation which it is unbelievable situation. Now, at the level of our union, what we are trying to do is to train our members for co-production. We say we have small means, let us put these small means and produce something. And we have a slogan now, we as African, we should tell our history ourselves.
Okay.
We should not only be there counting on other people. We should use the small means we have to tell our history. And you find that there are many people who are not happy with that, but we are trying to make co-production.
Thank you.
And we have, I told you 2 minutes would not be sufficient. Give me 1 other minute, please. And we have, that's why we are emphasizing on our news and exchange center of Algeria.
Yeah.
Because this center will help us to report what we have, the truth we have in Africa.
Very good.
Because in Africa, there are people who are fighting, who are working every day to earn a living. And that must be known by other people.
Thank you very
That's
much.
how about that.
Thank you. Give a big hand to Greg Ra. Yeah. And you are not the only country, and you're not working in no country without regulation. There are many countries, at least in our region, that do not have regulation. But I agree with you that we have to tell our stories, and Africa should tell the stories itself. Next question comes from somewhere. I have seen several hands. Riaz. Dr. Riaz.
الو نعم انا لدي ملاحظه وسؤال. الملاحظه هي عن عدم مشاركه هذه المنصات الدوليه في مؤتمر هذا. انا صراحه اعتقد ان هذا شيء يؤسف له ان هذه المنصات لم تشارك. انا تقدمت بهذا السؤال للسيد المهندس عبد، فقال لي أنهم وافقوا في البداية ثم اعتذروا في آخر لحظة. صراحة حتى المتحدث السيد استازي من جوجل لم يقل لنا الكثير عما تفعله جوجل. يعني كان يعني الحديث والكلمة يعني متواضعة، ما استفدنا كثيرا منها بكل صراحة. فلماذا هذه المنصات لا تشارك بفعالية في مؤتمر كهذا؟ على الأقل لا تدافع عن أنفسها، ولكن أيضا يعني تعطينا الحلول التي تضعها. هذه ملاحظتي أو مشاهدتي. أما سؤالي فهو للسيد جاكومو بخصوص الأنظمة الأوروبية وتطبيقها من قبل هذه المنصات. كيف يستطيع الاتحاد الأوروبي أن يتأكد أنها طبقت هذه المعايير على الأقل مثلا في موضوع حماية البيانات الشخصية؟ ليس هناك طرف ثالث يؤكد لنا تطبيقها لهذه القوانين والأنظمة. فهل نقبل ما تقول به هذه المنصات بأنها هي طبقتها أم هناك معيار آخر؟ شكرا.
Thank you. Because you addressed your question to Giacomo, apologize you for coming. Yes, please.
Yes, okay. My question is for Mr. Mazzoni. I would like to thank him first for your very informative presentation. I like it very much, actually. I have 3 bullets and a question. Personally, I would consider GDPR as a great achievements for the European Union. I do as well value the prompt reactions from some European countries. And now you have lawsuits already concluded and decrees have been issued, waiting to be executed. My question is, what are the Europe's elements with an S of power to enforce this decrees to be executed, knowing that your opponent is United States of America? Okay. And I mean United States of America. Okay. And my respect to you, I would like to remind you the confrontation between President Donald Trump and Huawei back 3 years back, and it was because a technology of the 5th generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Giacomo, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds, huh?
30 seconds, I cannot match it.
I have to challenge Europe anyway.
First to Najim, the platform respect, there has been an evolution in the European policy on that. The first code of self-regulation, code of practice against disinformation, for instance, was agreed with the platform, and it includes a certain number of obligations for the platform that they have to be respected. After 4 years, the European Union was unsatisfied, and the regulators' authority across Europe were unsatisfied about the accomplishment of this self-regulation. So they made the second version of the code, where the weaker point that has been identified during the first years of application has been strengthened. But in the meantime, the European Parliament approved DSA regulation that says that if the commitment of the self-regulation are not fulfilled, the authorities, the regulatory authorities could intervene, and could intervene with the graduation of measures. First is the warning, the second is a fine, and the third the last of in the row could be the suspension of the activities of the platform in all the European Union countries. Okay, they have this whole scale of activities, and this comes to the question that gentleman there. The real problem in the moment is that, let's say, there is a big division between US and Europe. Because US and Europe, they have a certain number of principles, a certain number of values that they shared all together. They have embraced both the capitalistic way of regulating the economy in the world, but they have substantial difference in some points regarding human rights. Privacy is one of that. Freedom of expression is the second one, because you know that, for instance, what is in the US is considered as freedom of expression, in Europe is considered as a crime. For instance, if you do apologies of Nazism, apologies of the Shoah, etc., are considered crimes. In the US, are freedom of expression. So until this difference between the two systems will not be regulated, I think that we will have a problem in having a common position. Then the problem is that values, even if we formally agree on values, then there are different angles of lecture of the values in each part of the world. So it will be very difficult to arrive to something in common based on values. Probably it's more easier to arrive to some practical conclusion on technical issues and technical solutions.
Thank you. I want to go to Andrea. And first, if you have any comment on the questions from the floor. But I also want to ask you to give me an idea about the role of multi-stakeholders cooperation. What is your definition in cooperation when it comes to your organization? Andrea?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, my comment on the question is that, it's crucial that we look at the great developments we are having in the field. I mentioned quantum computing, but it's just an example. Now there are, some great evolutions. So, for example, in OpenAI, ChatGPT is another example. Even more current is the recent announcement of the US government of a milestone on fusion energy, which sparks hopes for other forms of power and energy. But there are many great innovations ongoing. And innovation, as well as the shaping of the better regulation, depends on the contribution of all the different stakeholders, each one in her or his own role. I think that the example that Giacomo mentioned about the code of conduct on disinformation is very, very important in this perspective, because it was fine-tuned, through a dialogue, a very productive dialogue between the European Commission, the best experts in the field, and the private companies signing the code. And we are working with the European Commission, and the results are improving year after year. So I think that this kind of model for such complex issues, because they are global and the companies are multinationals, as we know, it's super important, even more now that is more and more clear that first, the global tech companies are more and more, not only the usual US digital native companies, but the market and the number of companies is strongly increasing. Asia is a great example in that perspective. And the need to regulate different kind of issues, where you mentioned fake news, disinformation, and so on and so forth, are so many that they require necessarily not an old-style legislative approach that is too slow by definition, but a more practical approach in cooperation between public and private stakeholders.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea. We have a few more minutes for further questions. First, if it is very brief, please stay with 30-second questions so that we can give more.
شكرا. الحقيقة سؤالي إلى مستر جايكو هكذا ربما نطقت اسمه بشكل صحيح. جاكومي أوكي. أعتقد أجمل ما سمعت من المحاضرة في البرزنتيشن هو أن كل القوانين لا تكون نافعة إن لم يتم تنفيذها، كما هي مقاربة المثل تقول بإمكانك أن تصطحب الحصان إلى بركة الماء، لكن لا تستطيع أن تجبره على أن يشرب منها. هذه القوانين إلى حد ما استطاعت أن تلجم الشركات في أوروبا وتستحصل منها ملايين الدولارات لأنها تجاوزت على سلم القوانين المعمولة. لكن نفس هذه الشركات لا تتعامل مع خصوصيات الدول الأخرى البعيدة عنها حينما تشرع أو تمنع أو تحد من تقويض سلطة بعض الإجراءات كالمثلية مثلا التي نرفضها رفضا. كيف تتعامل معها الشطر الثاني من سؤالي لو سمحت؟ إذا كان التشريع إذا كان التشريع يقوض المحتوى ويحد منا، أنا أستخدم عبارة يقوض ولا ينهي، فكيف يمكن محاسبة الشركات التكنولوجية التي تصنع برمجيات لصناعة الكذب، ديفيك على سبيل المثال؟ ما أنت تصنع المحتوى نعم وتحاسب، لكن امنع الوسيلة كي تحدد المحتوى. وشكرا.
Thank you. I would humbly request colleagues to limit their contribution to one question. Take note, but I would like to take one or two more questions and then come to the stage for answers quickly. 1 minute, one question.
Thank you. I just have one question. It's in regards to the algorithm. So basically my question is, what is the relation between algorithm and media regulation and the personalization of content?
Okay, thank you. You had 30 seconds?
Can I ask my question in French?
Well, I think English is better because I don't know where the French
بالعربي
translation is.
بالعربي. نور الدين صبري منسق الماجستير المهني في الصحافة متعددة المنصات بجامعة سوسة. سؤالي إلى السيد جورج عواد والسيد أندريا ستازي حول مسألة التعديل والتعديل الذاتي في مسألة تعني من ناحية العالم العربي والمسلم من ناحية، والعالم غير العربي أو غير المسلم من ناحية أخرى. هل يمكن أن لجوجل مثلا أن تكون عادلة في الأمور الملتصقة بالأمور الإيديولوجية والدينية والمشاكل التي يعرفها العالم حاليا من ناحية الجندر مثلا والأمور الشائكة التي من الصعب الوصول إلى حل يرضي الجميع من ناحية صنع المستوى على المستوى صنع المحتوى على المستوى الشخصي. شكرا.
Thank you. Perhaps the last question to you, and then to be fair with everybody, because we have to close the session.
عبد العظيم قمش من السودان. هنالك من يعتقد أن هذه القوانين مقيدة للحريات الشخصية. هل هذا التقييد هو دخول حقيقة في الحرية الشخصية أم نطلق المسألة على عواهنها مع اختلاف الثقافات والمحرمات والممنوعات التي في بعض الدول هي متاحة وفي بعضها غير متاحة؟
Thank you. So we come to the stage, and I will first give the floor to Andrea to say, to respond if possible, and then to George, and then Giacomo. Very briefly, please. I know that there are a few more questions, but let us, because she is a lady, and we have to always give priority, sorry, to ladies, so otherwise you know what happens. Yeah.
Just
very brief.
Just a question for Mr. George Awed. When we talk about regulation, for media, this term is a threat. How to regulate digital content without affecting freedom of expression? Thank you.
I appreciate that. Was a good question, George. Take note of that. Difficult question. I asked them to put difficult questions to you. Okay, Andrea first.
Yeah, super quickly. I'll thanks for the question. I'll pick up the example of religious belief just to be short, but happy to deep dive. We have extensive policies about religious belief, genders, etc. Just to mention religion. Google's policy prohibits advertisers from using its products, our products, to select or target personalized ads or collect or use audience data, cookies, etc., based on religious beliefs or other beliefs of similar nature. Our intention is to protect people from predatory targeting based on, for example, faith. So we are deeply committed to avoid any kind of discrimination based on religion, absolutely. On gender, it's even more. We have plenty of not only policies, but we have programs, campaigns with important investments and our own personal commitments in specific projects on diversity and inclusion. Very happy to dive. It would take half an hour, and probably I don't have this time today, but super happy to provide further details. But diversity and inclusion is absolutely, trust me, our daily bread for the whole company, but also at a personal level.
Thank you, George.
Yes, thank you. I think maybe the first question was more tackled by Andrea. Because at the end, from UNESCO point of view, we do respect and we always talk about the freedom of expression and speech in any way, and with taking into consideration all beliefs, culture, as well as religious color, and so this is within the constitution. But I'll move to the second difficult question, and this is something that's of course, to start by saying that that's what UNESCO does, and when we talk about freedom of expression and the importance of that, and that's what we are trying to tackle with different partners next month when we talk about the regulating of the digital platforms, because it's very critical to be able to maintain that freedom of expression but avoiding to go into whether the harmful content or the online content. And that's why the proposition is to work on a guide that I'll be glad to share with of course with the conference people, and to reach out to you by next month. We'll be talking about this regulation from various angles, content restriction, not restriction, the type of content, all this. But as I said, hopefully we'll have that by 24th of February.
Giacomo,
Thank you.
1 minute.
So first, to the young gentleman that raised the question, algorithm and media. Just to be precise, you know that already there are some newspapers that have 30% of the contents produced by algorithms, not anymore by journalists. So we are already in the media field in a very slippery way, where we need to be sure. For instance, it's mandatory to let know the audience that they are reading something written by a computer without human intervention or not. To who belongs the copyright of the machine, to the software producer, to the publisher, etc., etc. So there are a lot of issues, many issues. Not to forget, for instance, recommendation system. The recommendation system that make your diet about the news, what you receive on the Facebook feed, etc., is based on the input that you have given to the algorithm. And the algorithm, if you ask them about the Celtic Glasgow results, will flood you always with all the results about the football team that you have selected. So this is something that need to be regulated, and we need to reflect, because change the relation between the media and the users and the personalization of the program. Because the risk for that is that you can live in your own world that is not related with your reality or daily reality. About the Iraqi gentleman question, very large question. Enforcement is absolutely crucial. And the European Union didn't want to put the steps one after the other. They tried to do properly. So the fines of 700 million euros that has been given to Facebook a few weeks ago comes after a series of warning, a series of discussion with the company, asking why they did so. They have been warned not to do a certain kind of things. They've been proved that they were doing it. So at the end, the fine is the final result of the process. Now the process is long because they can go to appeal. Everything is done according to the European rules. But what is important is that if at the end of this process will be clear that the fines are there and they have to be paid, then the risk of the suspension of the activity is the biggest tool that you have. I just want to remember you the exchange of tweets between Elon Musk and the European Commission. Elon Musk wrote, from today, the tweet is free, is out of the cage. And the European Union Commissioner wrote a tweet saying, yes, but in Europe, we will sing according to the rules that we have established together. Now we will see. In few months, we will see if the sing of the tweet in Europe will be different from the sing of the tweet in the rest of the world. Last point, sorry, just to the second part of the question. What is fundamental is the applicable jurisdiction. This is the main problem on which we are breaking our heads in Europe. And Europe has taken a quite clear answer on that. Data of European citizens need to stay in Europe. This was the sentence of the European Court. Need to stay in Europe, need to be treated according to the European protection. And if you do the same, for the Arab region, this has to apply to your region. As
We
simple as
have-
that.
We have reached to the end of the session, but I would like to give the last 30 seconds to each panelist to just repeat or tell us the most important things that you want to emphasize or have emphasized, but in one sentence or two, starting from Andrea, one sentence or two.
Yes, thanks. One sentence. The journey of innovation for a better world, for good, for technology as a tool for good and for growth is a marathon, not a sprint. And it depends on the contribution of all of us. And we should work on both on innovation, focusing our effort on favoring and fostering innovation, and on providing the framework of principles and rules that can favor these protecting the fundamental rights.
Thank you, George. One sentence or two.
I will maybe start with summing up with one word, which is education. We're talking about, yes, regulation and everything, but to be able to complement this, I think, with all the regulation and the work being done and is being done in this direction, it's important to go back to the grassroots, to the community, to youth, and work on the education and creating that culture of thinking, critical thinking, absorbing, and the ability to create the right content and the non-harmful content and peaceful one.
One sentence, Giacomo, the last one.
Yeah, I would come back to the title of my presentation. The Far West, the gold rush started with that. Some people became very rich, but there was no stability in that place. That place became the west coast of the US as it is today. Once that the train line arrived there, the judges arrived there, and the sheriff were there.
Thank you.
After that, civilization arrived, and I think that we are in this phase. We have to build the train line. We have to appoint the sheriff and the judges, and this will be beneficiary also for the platforms that they can develop in a different direction from what they've done till today.
Please join me to thank panelists, and I thank you all for that. Thank you very much.
شكرا للسادة المتحدثين. لا شك أن هذه الجلسة المسائية وما تميزت به من مداخلات ثرية قد مكنتنا من التعرف على جملة من التجارب العالمية من أوروبا وآسيا وذات طابع أممي. موعدنا يتجدد صباح غد إن شاء الله لمواصلة تناول محاور أخرى ضمن اهتمامات المؤتمر الثاني للاعلام العربي. نذكركم حضرات السيدات والسادة بأنكم مدعوون هذه الليلة إلى حفل عشاء في الساعة 8 مساء، وسيكون تحرك الحافلة الباص في تمام الساعة 7:30 مساء. مرحبا بكم وإلى الملتقى إن شاء الله. شكرا.